Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. I'm pleased to be joined today on Writers at Work by Ron Charles, the book critic best known for his reviews published in the Washington Post, his former employer. If you know Ron's work, it goes without saying that his unceremonious exit from the Post represents another blow to the relevance of books and literature in American mainstream media. On his Substack, Ron discussed his situation with characteristic self-deprecation. I didn't start off as a journalist, he wrote. Some might say I didn't end up one either. 30 years ago, I gave up a perfectly respectable job teaching English to write book reviews for the Christian Science Monitor. His aunt's huffy reaction? Surely they're not going to pay you to do that. They did. Ron said he had 7 of the best years of his life at the Monitor, even if he toiled in relative obscurity. After a series of interviews, he was hired as a critic by the Washington Post. In time, he became editor of its Book World section. After 2 decades, and having received a National Book Critics Circle Award and served as a Pulitzer Prize judge, Ron was let go by the Post, and Book World was shut down. As the New Yorker's Becker Rothfeld summarized, quote, "No one who has anything to do with books remains employed at the Post," close quote. Among U.S. mainstream media, only the New York Times has a section dedicated to book reviews, though my former employer, the Wall Street Journal, regularly publishes book reviews. We can find publications and blogs dedicated to books, but as Becker points out, quote, "They are produced for an audience that already knows and cares about literature. The book section of a newspaper plays an altogether different role. It does not cater to aficionados. It seeks new recruits," close quote. It's been reported that at Ernst Lubitsch's funeral in 1947, Billy Wilder said, "No more Lubitsch." And William Wyler replied, "Worse than that, no more Lubitsch films." We can find online book reviews Ron Charles wrote for the Post and his reviews for CBS Sunday Morning on YouTube. But are we at the point of no more new Ron Charles book reviews? Let's start there. Ron Charles, welcome to Writers at Work.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me, Jim.
Ron, I want to quote you from your Substack. Quote, "Now I'm a little worried about myself. In the past, I've been bad with unstructured time. I'm not rich enough or tired enough to retire quite yet. So as long as I can flip pages, I intend to keep nattering on about books, authors, and our imperiled literary culture." That was about 3 weeks ago. What's going on with you now?
Yeah, I'm really bad at it. My wife left in a huff a few days ago and screamed back at me, "You're the only person I know who can make unemployment harder than having a job." I'm working myself to death, basically.
Yeah. I have a sense, though, that you knew these cuts were coming.
Yes. I mean, for a long time, I had no idea the scale, though. I mean, nobody did. I assumed there'd be trims here and there. I mean, Book World was a fairly rich target. We'd gotten pretty big when they brought back the separate section. You know, we were back up to, I think, 8 or 9 people, the 8 people. So it was, it was pretty obvious to everybody that that probably couldn't be sustained. But I had no idea they would get rid of the whole section, of course. Also, I vainly thought that my seniority would protect me from the cuts. But if you cut that many people, seniority starts to become a useless defense. So yeah, it was a shock.
Could you give us an idea of what the moment was like when you found out?
Oh, if you've been through one of these corporate things,
Yeah.
now I've joined the ranks of the damned. You are told not to go to work that day, and then you're told to sit in front of your computer at home, and at a certain time, they'll play a video and read a statement, which they did. And you'll find out if you've been retained or eliminated, I think is the phrase.
I would have to think that for you, uh, because I know many people like this who cover the arts. Their job is important, but the field they cover is important too. Did you have a sense of Now what's going to happen with books and Washington?
You mean after the cuts, do I have a sense of what'll happen?
Even as you were just sitting there and you hear you're no longer employed and books are not going to be covered anymore. And my goodness, what does it
Well,
mean?
yeah, I wish I were that selfish at that moment. My only concern my only concerns were for myself.
Yeah,
and,
sure,
and
sure.
then and then immediately my colleagues, because I knew one of them was, was just getting out of the hospital with a baby. Another one was sitting with their mother in hospice. She died a few hours later. Uh, so I was at least good enough to immediately think of my friends, but I wasn't really thinking about the culture beyond that until much later. But that culture's been imperiled for decades. I mean, so many book sections have closed, so many newspapers have closed. Uh, uh, this is not the first stab by any means.
Yeah, but that's why I mean, Book World was not, in my opinion, not so easily disposed of. I mean, I found it very important. I read it when I lived in Washington, but I read it when I didn't live in Washington.
Yeah, it was a good section, and it had become stronger in the last 2 years when they bumped up the staff, and we hired for the first time a feature writer, um, a really talented young woman who was able to jump on, Newsy, publish, do interviews, do profiles, all that kind of stuff that we always wanted to do. And we did sometimes with freelancers, but now we had somebody on staff for the first time. That was great. And then we brought John Williams down from the New York Times to be our editor. So it was a pretty robust section of fiction and nonfiction. We got Beth Rothfeld, who's on to the New Yorker already. Uh, so yeah, I agree. It was a good section.
Yeah. So the U.S. is the world's largest book market. What does it say when the nation's capital no longer has a daily newspaper committed to the arts in general and books in particular?
Yeah, it's distressing, but many big cities don't have book sections. Most, right? Uh, this is uh, this is a problem that we're now producing what, like 500,000 new titles a year, maybe a million new titles a year commercially, millions more self-published, of course. Uh, we probably produce more books than readers nowadays, and yet there are very few people to help us navigate that sea of publications, and that's kind of troubling for the art.
Yeah. Had you noticed an erosion of respect for the arts at the Post in recent years?
No, no, I really hadn't. It was pretty robust. Um, no, and they just hired a theater critic, great young guy, really smart, to replace somebody who'd retired a couple of years ago. No, it was I didn't feel that way at all.
Okay. So in this chaotic period where you anticipated cuts, you didn't know how deep they'd be, but you anticipated cuts. How did it affect your work?
Uh, well, it immediately brought it to a complete stop.
And I mean, let's go back to let's go back a year, let's say, before
Oh
you
no, no, it didn't affect me at all.
really.
I had a great job. Uh, I could review pretty much what I wanted to review. They gave me a lovely office up on the eighth floor overlooking a park. Uh, I got this newsletter about 7 or 8 years ago where I could write about whatever I wanted to write about. No, I was sitting pretty.
So you weren't looking over your shoulder.
No, also, I only wanted to stay another 4 or 5 years. So, it wasn't like I was in mid-career where I had panicked for so long about losing my job in journalism. I thought, this close, I can make it.
Right, right. I can't understand the logic. I've been trying to work this out now since I heard this news. The logic of a newspaper owned by a man who also owns the world's largest bookseller, taking a position that will result in the sale of fewer books. I can't make that make sense.
I I am not in management. I never had any contact with management. I have no idea. I cannot even speculate on that. But book reviews don't have much effect on sales of books, so there's a very tenuous relationship there. The book market is so vast, and the influence of reviews is so minor. uh, that in economic terms, this is in aggregate not very monumental. The
Yeah.
problem is it will affect serious nonfiction and serious literary fiction, I think maybe dramatically, because those books do fight for audiences. The audiences are relatively small, in the hundreds, tens of thousands. Those kind of books really need serious attention to find their readers, and so that is hard. I've talked to many publishers and publicists, not just in the last few days, but also then, who really feel this could affect their work.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't want to overstate the influence of book reviewers, but for me, book reviewers are very important. I make almost all my decisions on what books to buy and read based on what reviewers have said.
Well,
Um,
I don't blame you. I'm sure you're a serious reader, right? And so you're not just picking your books off the bestseller list. How else would you find out about books except through serious criticism?
I tend to agree with the comment by Becca that book sections of a newspaper don't cater to the already passionate about reading. It seeks new recruits. Did you, over the years, hear from readers who you turned on to new authors or to new works by familiar authors?
Oh, yeah. They tend to be really nice people because they're readers. They tend to be writers too. And yeah, it was really sweet to hear from a lot of readers who discovered new books or once in a while would read a book I recommended and didn't like it or wanted to tell me about a book that they read that they wanted to hear my opinion on. Yeah, it's a lovely conversation you have with readers after many years.
Yeah, and I guess this, of course, I'd have this opinion. It's not inconsequential. I mean, to turn somebody on to a book can be a life-changing experience.
Oh, yeah, we all feel that in our own lives, right? The books that changed our lives. It also changes authors' lives too, you know.
Yeah,
You give an author serious attention, these days it might, he or she probably will only get one or two reviews if they get any reviews at all. It may be the most serious independent feedback that author gets. It can be very influential.
yeah. What did you look for in a book, Ron? Uh,
I wanted a voice that I thought was distinctive. Uh, First, I wanted a plot that was engaging, very broad things. I wanted themes that felt engaged with the way we live. I tried to keep my criteria really broad because I wanted to be able to appreciate lots of different kinds of books in different genres. So I didn't want and never developed any hard and fast rules about what I thought was good or unacceptable. I mean, certain things were unacceptable. Sentimentality, the cliche treatment of people with special needs, racism, homophobia, those kind of things, obviously mark a book as bad. But otherwise, I wanted to be open to whatever authors were coming up with.
yeah. I note that you were always open to first-time authors.
I tried to be. I so appreciate you saying that. I hope you mean it because it's hard to do. We don't have pre-readers. We didn't have pre-readers at the Post. So when we did a debut author, it was kind of a guess. We were kind of jumping into the darkness there. I've got 52 spots. I take 4 weeks of vacation, so we're down to 48 spots. Probably 35 of those spots during the year are going to be taken by big name authors, that we all know that I'm going to review. The Gary Steingart and Ann Patchett and all the others, great people that people want to know about. So that only leaves a handful of open spots for debut novels. And so it had to matter. And I don't read fast enough to go through many books and then pick one for the week. I had to do my research with the help of my editors and then pretty much commit Monday and push myself, 100, 120 pages into the book. If I find that it's not worth reviewing, by which I mean only that I can't think of anything interesting to say about it, it was really hard to pick up another book on Tuesday and begin again because I couldn't work on it Wednesday or Thursday. I had to do the newsletter. So the time went very fast every week. So finding debut books was challenging, but I always wanted to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I think you had two of your top five this year were debut novels. I could have that wrong, but I think that was the case. So I've been catching up on your reviews for CBS Sunday Morning. You seem well suited to that.
It's been an interesting gig. I've been at it about 6 years. It took a long time to set up. It wasn't me. It was Post PR set it up and then brought me in at the end. And just as the pandemic began, and so we put all this work into it, and then the pandemic started, and they said, the studio's closed, everything's closed. What can we do? I guess we'll just wait till the pandemic's over and start again. And I said, well, I do happen to have a camera, a green screen, and my wife can just film it herself. And so for we just kept doing it all through the pandemic, and then after the pandemic, we kept doing it. So if you here in my living room, a dining room, we just take all the furniture out, set up the green screen, and stand there in my one suit, and my wife films it. I have to memorize it because I can't wear my glasses and I can't read the any cue cards because the studio lights make my glasses go dark. So I use glasses that have no glass in them.
Oh my.
There I am staring blindly out into the void, having memorized the script as best I can, and then we just ship that raw copy up to New York, and they do their magic with it. When I see it, it's the first time I've ever seen it with everyone else. I think they do a remarkable job.
Yeah, I'm a bit older than you, Ron, but when we were kids, were there book reviews a lot on TV? I don't recall.
Well, older than us even. Remember the talk shows? They
Like
used to
David Susskind would have authors, I guess, and
exactly, yeah. Uh,
Bennett Cerf was on What's My Line?
and there are another David too. I'm like these are all black and white talk shows. They always
Yeah,
smell on them too, which I
right.
found so shocking to me. Uh, Remember, they would have conversations that would go on for 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Dick Cavett would have
Dick
on
Cavett, that's it.
would have Norman Mailer and Gore Vidal have a fight, or Mary McCarthy have a fight with somebody. But what I like about yours is that there's a lot of personality there, but it, I don't find that you pander. I think ultimately that you understand that the subject is serious.
Well, it's a pretty serious show, so I'm lucky there, right? I mean, I don't know if many morning news shows would put up with my choices, but they never turned me down. Once or twice, they said, we happen to have an interview with that author running the same day, so maybe pick another book. But otherwise, they never objected, no matter what I picked. So I was lucky.
Yeah. So where are we, Ron? What do you think is the future of book reviewing?
Oof. I don't think what happened to the Post and to Book World changes the trajectory. It just continues it. So that's pretty grim. Uh, I think Becca's right. Those literary magazines and blogs and sophisticated journals will continue, mostly limping along, because there is an audience, of a few tens of thousands of people here and there who want that. But book criticism in newspapers is pretty much gone. The Wall Street Journal, your paper,
Yeah.
former paper, still has a great book section. That's why I started getting the paper years ago. Uh, and there are a couple of the newspapers that still do book coverage, but no, what's gonna be left are features with best-selling authors, little at-home profiles, and lists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't and maybe I'll open this up to our listeners also if they'd like to write in. I just don't understand how it works if 500,000 books are published and nobody is telling us what to read. And I shouldn't say that because you didn't tell us what to read. You were suggesting.
Yeah.
You would give us a little nudge there, and I don't know how it works. Boy, I'd love to talk to the chairman of XYZ Publishing and say, how do you expect us to find out
Right.
your best authors?
Yeah, I think they must be. Of course, they were already panicking, but yeah, they must be in a panic. And remember during the Random House Penguin Random House trial over the merger with what was it, Simon and Schuster? Can't remember. The merger trial, anyhow. Remember they got those Random House people up on the chair and made them testify about how they could predict what books would sell, and all of them swore under oath that they could not tell. They just have no idea still what will work. it's still lightning in a bottle. And so without reviews, without advertising, I guess they just depend on, the beleaguered army of independent booksellers who are still, doing great work out there. And there are more of them. There are librarians, of course. There's an army of librarians who are doing God's work. Uh, and that's a huge, huge influence we probably should not ignore. But yeah, I don't know how publishers will do it.
That's an excellent point about librarians. They are our gatekeepers, I guess. They're going to have to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they have been and they will continue to be. And they do, all those displays in well, I don't know how many tens of thousands of libraries there are in this country, all those displays of new books, that influences, I suppose, millions of people, right?
Yeah. So how's the Substack going?
I couldn't believe that it would work. I met with a couple Substack editors about a year ago, talked to them about this, and I wasn't convinced it was viable. But uh, now viability has been thrust upon me, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, yeah.
So I embraced it, and I'm starting to dare to think that it might just work. Yeah, it might just work.
Well, I'd like to know what Ron Charles thinks about new books.
Well, God bless you. It is really, I mean, all the problems the publishers have are the same ones I'm having, discoverability. How do I get people to discover me online and read about it? And for all the talk about how people, want book reviews, I mean, we see the traffic. I mean, I saw it at the Post. I see it now on Substack. We see the actual numbers, and people do not accurately reflect their behavior. I can tell you that. They may say they want book reviews, but what they will click on is a list. They might say they want book reviews, but what they will click on is a profile of some hot young author.
Right.
So in 100 million different ways, readers were telling us every hour what they really wanted, and it was not book reviews.
Yeah.
At least not in the numbers that could justify the expense. And that's a real challenge for most newspapers. I mean, having a critic is a ridiculous luxury. To pay somebody a salary to read books when you can buy a freelance copy or even not buy it, just, give them the book for free. It is not an economic decision that most newspapers can justify.
Right. So, Ron, are you a person who has to write? If somebody said to you, you can never write another word, how would that sit with you?
Yeah, I am. That's why the newsletter was such a godsend to me, and I resisted it so much. I'd never heard of a newsletter 8 years ago. It seemed really fussy and old-fashioned, but gosh, it's just a great forum for someone like me, who just wants to write, who just wants to spot lots of different things, who has a wide taste and a variety of interests. That sort of flexibility is a godsend for me.
Yeah. I would wager, largely because this happened to me, is when you found something exciting, um, you had a chemical reaction that you had to tell people about it.
Yes.
And it's not very practical to stand on the street corner and shout at strangers. And so you'd have to write it, and you'd write it with all sorts of enthusiasm as well as insider's perspective. And it was very satisfying to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think I'm not at all comfortable talking about my my value or my talking about what I do well. But one of the things I do well, I think, is express enthusiasm, and that counts for something. I think too many critics are insufficiently enthusiastic. They don't push hard enough against the deadening effect of this culture, which doesn't want us to be enthusiastic about the arts. I find too many reviews are just not engaging enough. They just don't light any fire. There are too many meh reviews, which, and I'm not arguing that every review has to be, full of praise, but find things that you can praise. find things that can get people excited about theater, movies, music, books. There are good things out there. Your job as a reporter first is to find them, and then as a critic is to convince people.
My guest on this episode of Writers at Work has been Ron Charles, one of the best book reviewers in the mainstream who, having exited the Washington Post, will ply his trade elsewhere. Check his Substack. It's already accrued 24,000 subscribers. Ron, thanks for joining us on Writers at Work.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure, Jim. Thanks so much.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusili. Until next time, happy reading.